Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Sunday, January the 21st. And let me say hello to our good friend George Rodriguez from San Antonio, where I understand, George, that it's been a little windy down there in good
Yes,
old
we've
San
had.
Antonio. So tell us about it.
We've had. We were having such wonderful, really warm weather, and then all of a sudden, we had a cold snap hit us last weekend. We had a windstorm but then we had a follow up one on Friday, which was really strong again, and then we had another one last night. And these two last ones have apparently caused a lot of branches and trees to fall over, and it caused some sort of shortages.
Yes, I would think so. We had, a week ago, Sunday or into Monday, we had some flurries and some very light snow and some ice and all of that. And then tonight, we're supposed to get some precipitation. The temperatures are going to be low enough that they could be flurries or maybe some ice. But I think it'll go away by midday tomorrow. So we also have some exciting weather. I guess that's what makes living in January so wonderful, George.
Yeah, well, we're supposed to have some heavy rain tomorrow and Tuesday, and in fact, there's a flood. There's a flood warning, not a watch, but a flood warning in Houston, and all the way halfway to San Antonio. So
Wow.
we're going to get some heavy rain here.
So excitement on I-35.
Yes, and I thought it was all over that now that the Cowboys had lost, but
Yeah, I tell you, that was a nasty Sunday night here. I'll tell you
no,
that right now.
I blame the Democrats.
Well, what else? We have to blame it on
COVID.
somebody,
I
right?
blame COVID. I blame
Yeah.
the fake news.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It's too bad we didn't get to see Detroit and Dallas go at it each other.
Rematch.
That would have been fun. That would have been a good game,
Yeah.
but I guess we'll have to wait till next year. And speaking of the Cowboys, I just want to remind everybody of this. It was 45 years ago today that the Cowboys and the Steelers played Super Bowl 13. And this was a fantastic game. If anybody has ever seen the NFL films, these films that they're so good, these films that they've put together. But Super Bowl 13 was one of the greatest games ever. And it turned out to be the last game of the 1970s, the last postseason game of the 1970s between the two teams that were the best two teams of the 1970s, the Cowboys and the Steelers. So there's a lot to watch in that game. And I always get a kick out of watching it, the summaries of that.
What was the final score in that one? I can't
It was
remember.
35-31.
35-31, correct.
And the Cowboys scored 2 touchdowns in the last 3 minutes. And so they almost came back.
Didn't Staubach
yes, he did.
retire right after that?
Pretty close. I think maybe he played another year, but that was pretty much the end of that run, that great run that they had in the 70s. But if anybody ever wants to see a really good game, you don't have to watch the whole game, but NFL Films has these, documentaries, the highlights, and they're just absolutely great. And then I also want to say hello to one of my favorite people, and that's Placido Domingo, the great singer from Spain, great voice. And he's 83 years old today. But here's something amazing, George. I read about this. He made his professional debut in 1961. So that would have been, he was 20 years old, maybe. And he made it in Dallas, Texas. Now that's crazy.
That? Yeah.
That he would make, I guess he was performing some opera or something like that. And he was here in Dallas, Texas. So I found that to be rather interesting. Well, let's get into some serious things going on in the news. It appears that Texas and the DOJ have a lot of fights going on. The latest one, of course, is over Eagle Pass. There's also one over the barriers on the river, the famous buoys, I guess they're called.
No, I think the buoys have that has been resolved. I think now we've gone to the Constantina wire, the
right
wire.
The buoys. They basically said we're not gonna do anything till May, I think, when the next review is, and then the wire. they're fighting over that, but Texas keeps putting up wire. And, I think what's happening and is that we're learning how good the governor is and the attorney general, the two of them, how good they are. We just lost George there for a second. But I think we're learning how good the governor and the attorney general are at crafting these cases, so that when they go to the Supreme Court, they're crafting a case in such a way that they're not saying that they have let's say the power to run immigration, but in fact they're saying to the federal government, this is your terrain. I think we got our friend back. Let me see. Well, anyway, I think we got him back. George,
Yeah.
we got you back there. Okay. No, but George, right before you left us, not literally, but I guess literally you left us. But I was going to say for a short time you left us. But anyway, what I was about to say is that I think what we're seeing here in these cases is how well crafted these cases are from the perspective of the governor and the attorney general. They really know how to prepare these cases, and they know exactly what lane to go down, if I could put it that way. I mean, they recognize, they concede that the federal government has a role to play here, but they're saying we're only doing it because you're not doing your part. It's an amazing good argument, George.
Yeah, it's a tremendous 1-2 punch, and I think that the good thing about it, the thing that I applaud both the governor and the attorney general in, is that they have taken these cases in increments. They have taken a point-by-point, step-by-step attack on the federal government for not doing what it's supposed to be doing. There are a lot of people who, for a long time here in Texas, have been demanding that the state take all sorts of strong action, that they send the National Guard. Initially was to shut the border down completely. Initially it was to deport people on their own. Obviously, the state government couldn't do that. But however, what has happened is that they have taken, the governor and the attorney general have taken a step-by-step process of doing what they can do, making it very obvious that the federal government is not doing it. And in doing so, they are showing the courts as they go along the failures of the federal government. And I think that is, I mean, to me, they are great. They have done exactly what needed. You don't take a gun and shoot down a gnat. You do it incrementally, and that's how they've approached it.
Yeah,
there is a lot that should be done. There's a lot that still can be done, but at this point, the embarrassment is Biden's, and the problem is the federal government that has not protected the state of Texas.
Right. Exactly. And I think a good analogy for people who may not be following this, a good analogy about what's happening here between Texas and the federal government. Imagine that you are the tenant, let's say an apartment building, and the landlord, the tenant and the landlord, they both have certain responsibilities under the contract. Obviously, the landlord has to do certain things in the premises and certain things. And then, of course, the tenant has to pay the rent. They both have responsibilities. But when the landlord is not doing his part, then the tenant can say, hey, I'm not going to pay the rent because you're not living up to your side of the deal. And I think that's kind of what, my example is very simplistic.
I think that's a very good one. I think that's very good because the federal government is not living up to its contract, to the Constitution, and its responsibilities to the state.
Right. No, I think you're right, and I think that the good judgment of the governor and the attorney general is to do this in a very deliberate way, where they're saying, "Look,
document it properly and show it."
That's right. The Texas is not saying
screamed and yelled and called the police.
Right.
but that wouldn't have done too much.
No, yeah, but I mean, I think Texas is saying, look, we agree with you that this is a federal responsibility,
Yes, but you're
but
just not doing
but you're
it.
not doing it, so we have to do it. So I think it's an amazing case, and I guess next week we should have
I,
follow up
I,
on
I
the Eagle
completely and
Pass
totally
situation.
applaud. I completely and totally applaud the.
I do. I agree. And he's getting a lot of recognition around the country, by the way, the governor for this.
Yes.
He's getting a lot of people who are agreeing with him
Well,
in what
the
he's
question
doing.
should be if it happens to Texas, it could happen to anybody else.
Well, sure, and we have the largest border, and I think that's the problem. One fascinating thing that I read today, speaking about the border, comes from this new senator from Pennsylvania, Senator Fetterman.
Yes.
And he was on, I don't know, one of the networks. I think it was CNN. He was on CNN and he was saying, look, these are not two different things. You can be for immigration, legal immigration, and at the same time, you can be for border security.
Exactly.
And that used to be what everybody believed, that, yeah, it's great to have immigration. Nobody opposes legal immigration. It's a good thing. But when you're having the kind of chaos that we're having on the border, and look what's happening in New York, on the streets of New York. I mean, it's just madness. And George, in a way, I feel like some of these migrants have been used. I have sympathy for them because they were used by everybody along the way. They were used by the people who were charging them money to come to the United States or to the border, and they've been used once they're in here, because they're really not prepared to deal with moving to the United States. Most of them, they don't have work permits. They don't really have the ability to support themselves. And I don't know whether many of them understood that when they decided to come to the United States, George.
No, I mean it is. I have used the word in Spanish títere, that they are puppets when speaking to some of these folks. It is very, very obvious that they are being played in a political game by the Democrats. I mean, from the moment that they claim sanctuary status for their cities and then immediately say, no, never mind, we can't handle all these people. So it's obvious. It's very, very obvious that this is a political game that's being played.
Right. And then you look at, with the winter now in New York and Chicago, many of these people they're not prepared for the winter. I can tell you, when our family first came to the United States and we were here legally, that first winter will shake you up, believe me. And so I can just imagine how difficult it must be from some of these people coming from climates that they don't have weather like that. Well, let's jump a little bit to the political side of things. The Republican nomination seems to be shaking up very quickly, and it's all favoring former President Trump. Governor DeSantis dropped out today. I thought he had a chance to listen to the whole thing he said. I thought he was wonderful in the statement that he made. I mean, just a perfect statement that he made to get out of this. I'm assuming that Nikki Haley will drop out as well, sometime probably next week after New Hampshire. She'll do better in New Hampshire than she did
I don't
in
know.
Iowa.
A woman scorned. I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, she's going to probably do technically better, but she doesn't have much of a future after that. What I'm hoping is that she drops out, frankly.
Yes.
And we can end this whole nonsense, because it's going to be Trump. I mean, that's fairly obvious. Now, did you have a chance to watch DeSantis? Because it was only like a 5-minute speech, but I thought it was great. I thought it was absolutely great.
No, I haven't had a chance to do that.
Yeah, well, check it out, because I'd recommend that to everybody in the audience. Check it out, because I thought this was DeSantis at his finest. When he's basically saying, look, this is why I got in. This is why I'm getting out. And, we're supporting President Trump, and let's move on. I thought it was very well done, the way he did it. But of course,
his character is much more. I guess it's because of his training at West Point and because being an officer. I've always felt that his training is very, very good when it comes to the media, when it comes to public comments. I have felt that he is much more competent and comfortable in front of the media. And this is one of the things that I applaud about him. On the other hand, I'm hoping that that our former president Trump could learn a little bit more and could get somebody like DeSantis on there to help him. I mean, Vice President Pence was very good at handling the antagonistic press. I'll use that word.
Yes. No,
And,
I agree.
I'm hoping that he will get away from the name calling now that it becomes more and more evident that he is going to be the nominee.
I agree, and I think you're right about that. I support that 100%. But here's the thing about DeSantis that is fascinating. A year ago, when all of this got started, remember, all of this got started after he had that amazing election night in 2022, where he won re-election in Texas by 19 points. They had a tremendous Republican night in Florida. I mean, I said Texas, I mean Florida. He was re-elected by over 19 points, almost 20 points. And everything was lining up for DeSantis. And in fact, a year and a half ago, he was tied.
Looking very good.
Yeah. It seemed like it was his time, But then they started attacking Trump, and that just made Trump tougher and stronger. And a lot of people just went to the Trump side, and you could just see DeSantis support dropping. I think he still has a future. I really do, in politics. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in a second. But before we leave New Hampshire, George, I heard something today. President Biden is not on the ballot, but there is another candidate, a fellow named Phillips, a representative from Minnesota, who's on the ballot. So the big fear in New Hampshire is that Phillips defeats Biden. Now, Biden, again, is not on the ballot, so he's not technically defeated, but there is a movement to, like a write-in movement for Joe Biden. And how embarrassing that would be if a congressman from Minnesota that nobody knows defeats Joe Biden in New Hampshire, or not Joe Biden directly, the movement to write in. I don't know. It is really, it's really crazy. I think the Democrats made a huge mistake he could have run in New Hampshire and won. That is President Biden. He could have run there as the incumbent.
Presidents have historically always run.
Yes, that's right.
They have always gotten out there, and even if incumbent presidents have always run, and that's the end of it.
That's it. But no, you're right. You get 98% of the vote, and it's all.
This one has been coordinated already, and it's so much of the behavior of the current Democratic Party mimics the behavior of Russian communism. I'm sorry. I just, that sounds like an extreme comment, but I just can't, looking at the two and seeing how their behavior has been, well, even Cuban communism. I mean, all of a sudden.
Any communism.
Yeah. It just is.
But I find it fascinating that they didn't participate in Iowa. They're not going to participate in New Hampshire. And all they had to do was sign up and put him on the ballot, and he would have won both of them easily. But now they're running into the embarrassment that he may be outvoted. Again, he's not on the ballot, but the movement to write him in could be outvoted by.
And there's a lot of antagonism towards him. I mean, there is a lot of antagonism
on their side
within his party.
Which leads me to the point, before we get to the VP ideas, the vice presidential ideas, I think that if Donald Trump can wrap this up, and he should be able to wrap it up in the next 2 or 3 weeks, what he should do is basically get away from the news and basically just step aside and not be in the news every day. Now, obviously, it's easy to be away from the news when you're not running for something. But if he could just kind of step aside and let Joe Biden be on the front page, because I think Biden is the one who's having some difficulties with his party at the moment. Okay, let's look at some possibilities for vice president before we leave tonight. The decision doesn't have to be made right now. It would be foolish to make it now, I think. Probably, I'm assuming the convention is going to be in late July or something. So he's got 6 months, 5 months to do it. But here's my four choices at the moment. And if you agree or disagree, or you have a different name, please give it to me. But I'm going to mention these starting with number 4. Governor DeSantis as vice president. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, they just had a campaign. Look, we've seen this throughout history. People campaign against each other and then they make up. Reagan and Bush in 1980, Kennedy and Johnson in 1960. So these
On and on.
On and on. So people, they're going to come together if the party tells them to come together for the good of the party. So I would argue DeSantis, because I still think once DeSantis gets out of the campaign and he goes back to being governor of Florida, and let's say for the next 3 or 4 months, that's who he is, the governor, the successful governor of Florida. I think DeSantis is going to be rising again. And a lot of people, particularly suburbanites, look at DeSantis very, very well. So I say DeSantis is number 4 on my list, George.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think DeSantis has got to be a consideration in some form or fashion. But again, as long as they can mend fences, and if Trump and Cruz could mend fences, he can mend these two can mend fences.
Absolutely. So I would put DeSantis at number 4 on my list. Number 3, J.D. Vance, senator from Ohio. Now, there is a long shot, I think, because he's only a first-term senator.
Yeah, right.
But he is a success. He was a successful businessman before he came into office. But he would bring a lot of youth and a lot of enthusiasm, and he would play very well with the base. So I would argue that he's number 3. I still rank him as a long shot, but he's a very attractive candidate. I saw him this morning on one of the channels talking about New Hampshire. He's well-spoken. He's telegenic. I think he'd be a good guy in this day and age, George.
Yeah, the fact that he comes from the private sector is really appealing to me. So now he is a long shot, like you said, but having 2 non-politicians for the first time ever, or for the first time since the founding of our nation, I think would be great.
Now, a lot of people are going to try to compare him to Dan Quayle, who was also a young senator. I always thought Dan Quayle was given a very bum rap.
I was there. I remember Dan Quayle.
But Dan Quayle was
a senator.
Yes.
And Dan Quayle was very photogenic. He was very pleasant, but he lacked in the smarts.
Well, sure, but I'm saying that's what they'll say that about J.D. Vance, except I think J.D. Vance is a pretty smart guy. But again, I do concede that he's a long shot. Number 2, and I wrote a post at American Thinker today about this, Lee Zeldin of New York. Now, Lee Zeldin, member of Congress. Prior to that, he's a lawyer by training. He served in Iraq. He was a congressman from New York. He ran for the governor of New York in 2022, put up a great fight, came within 3 or 4 points of winning that race. In fact, a lot of people thought he was going to win. And I think he would add a lot to the ticket. You would have a vice presidential candidate who could actually talk about city issues and urban issues, which I think this year present a real opportunity for the Republican Party to go into some of these blue cities and point out to some of these people, hey, whatever the Democrats are telling you is not working. So I like Lee Zeldin. I don't know how you feel about him.
Well, other than the fact that it would be 2 New Yorkers on the ticket at that point. I mean, Trump claims Florida, of course, but he is a New Yorker. Outside of that, I think he would be a good one. I think he's really, really a long shot on it, though, because he's from the East Coast. He's from the state of New York, and again, he hasn't been a politician that long.
Right. Well, that's true. So he is somebody who who I think, like you say, it's a long shot, but he's a very talented guy. I would argue that he has more experience than J.D. Vance, let's say,
Mhm.
or more experience than Dan Quayle had when he was selected. Now, let me go to my number one pick. This is the person that I like to see on the ticket. Mike Pompeo, former Secretary of State,
Yeah.
former CIA director, I believe, former member of Congress. I think also a West Point graduate, actually, former officer, military officer. The reason that I say Mike Pompeo, he's a very smart man, obviously. The reason I say is because I believe that 2024 is going to be a year where we're going to be talking a lot about national security.
Mhm.
You know the map of the world, and it's crazy right now. I mean, there are so many fires around the world. Any one of them could get us into a war. That's how crazy it is. Iran, Russia, China. I mean, any one of them. And I think having somebody on the ticket who projects that knowledge of national security would make me feel good, George. How do you feel about him?
All the points that you made regarding his abilities, his knowledge of international affairs, obviously, is very, very good, and I think that would really, really complement the Trump ticket. Again, I think there's been so much bad blood between the two of them that I am not sure. I mean, I would have a very, very difficult time in seeing how the two of them could work together, given the bad blood that has occurred in the past 2 years. On the other hand, I have seen bad blood, you know, uh, be fixed. I have seen rifts be fixed before. So, I think that he would be very, very good. I am not sure that he would be my number one pick.
Yeah.
But he is, he is very, very good. I would look to other folks like former senator from Missouri, who would be a Southerner. Gosh, his name slips my mind right now. I'd look to him as
He's a
well.
former senator?
Former senator from Missouri.
Missouri. I'm trying to remember who he was. Uh,
Gosh, he was also the attorney general for Missouri. But I would
no,
look.
I see yeah, I know who you're talking about.
But I would look to him. I would also look to Governor Abbott.
Well, that's the other
I would look
thing
to
too.
Governor Abbott. I mean, Governor Abbott would be a dynamite VP.
And he would bring the border.
He would bring the border issue right into everybody's backyard.
Right, and yeah, no, I agree. I think Governor Abbott would be a fantastic choice as well. Now, there's a lot of conventional wisdom that says that. By the way, speaking of Missouri, the current senator from Missouri, who's now in his second term, I can't think of his name, the younger of the two, would also be a very good choice. There's some talk of the governor from North Dakota, who he was a presidential candidate, was in a couple of debates for a short time. There's also talk about Vivek, but I think Vivek is too young. That's my opinion.
Too young, and again, I think he would handle the media very, very well. But I think because he's too young, I'm not sure that he would handle being second.
Right, exactly. And something else too that people need to understand is that, and I thought Mike Pence was very good at this. The vice president is actually the president of the Senate. So you spend most of your time in the Senate. You're not really out there.
You've got to know the Senate.
You got to know the Senate, and you got to get along, and you got to put up with all of the day-to-day stuff there. Now, Nikki Haley's out, and I never thought she had a chance, but again, they could make up. I mean, this is how crazy this is.
I think, I mean, and the situation that I see with Nikki Haley as well as other folks like Hillary Clinton is that they have very, very strong character because I guess they think that they are fighting in a man's world, and so therefore they got to really, really fight a lot harder than is necessary. And I think that puts them at a disadvantage, because then they don't cooperate at a later time.
Well, yeah, Nikki Haley. I never, I never thought of her as even a presidential candidate. I always thought of her more as someone that you put in a cabinet. That's what I always, and that is what they did with her. They put her in the UN secretary. Now, one last point in this, George, before we go. There's a lot of conventional wisdom that says that he has to pick a woman. And I'm looking at the possibilities, but I'm looking at the possibilities. Yes. And I'm saying Governor Sanders, Huckabee Sanders from Arkansas, wonderful. Everybody loves her. But she's not even in her second year as the governor of a very small state. I mean, come on. That's that's pushing
Although she did handle the press very well for him.
Yes, he would.
Whether or not she could handle the Senate and the press again would be interesting. However, the fact of the matter, like you pointed out, she is relatively new.
Right. And then you have the other woman who's being talked about is the lady who's the governor of South Dakota. Now, she's been around a little bit longer, but again, what does that bring the ticket? You're already going to win South Dakota by 40 points. Yeah. So I'm not exactly sure what that brings to the ticket.
You need somebody, that's going to bring something, as well as that has a powerful presence.
Right, exactly. And then the other possibility is this lady from New York, Lajanic, I think, Eliza, whatever her name is, the woman who asked the questions of the university presidents. I can't think of her name right now. Right. But again, the issue with her is her lack of experience. I mean, you are talking about having somebody, a heartbeat from the presidency. And I've always felt more comfortable. That's one of the reasons why I was happy when George W. Bush selected Cheney, because, you've got somebody there with experience, and I just, or when Reagan selected Bush, you got somebody there with some experience. I like the idea of having somebody with experience in the vice presidency. And I don't see any of the lady governors that have been talked about. They may be very popular and very conservative, and I know somebody's going to send me an email about that, but it's not them. It's just, I just don't think they're ready yet. Give them a little bit more time. So that's why I focused on these four. Now, I will tell you,
some people have sent me notes and said that they know, I don't know how, but that they know that Tucker Carlson is going to get selected.
Well,
and I've also had notes, that there's Russian troops just south of Dallas. So,
right. Well, Tucker Carlson, I'm not exactly sure who he brings in that he doesn't already have. And with all due respect to Tucker, who's a wonderful commentator, Tucker has never really run anything. I mean, he ran his television show and he did so successfully. I'll give him that. But he's never really been in politics. And some people say, well, that's a good thing. Well, you got to have some experience. I'm sorry. You got to have some experience to do this. You know who I wish we had? Somebody like your old boss at Health, Jack Kemp. That's who I wish we had. Somebody like that. Somebody like Jack Kemp sitting around, like the late Jack Kemp, who I always liked a great deal. But anyway, these are just speculative conversations. I don't expect President Trump to be naming anybody. He doesn't have to.
Throwing names around. Let's not get excited.
That's right. Plenty of time to do it. But these four names, interesting though, I'll say this before we wrap up. After listening to your analysis of my first four choices, DeSantis all of a sudden comes up, because DeSantis is someone with experience, someone who has run something. So maybe DeSantis wouldn't be a bad choice.
I don't think he would be. I think he'd be a very, very good choice.
And he would bring some of that experience, and
he would know how to hold his tongue around him.
Yes.
While at the same time, he would know how to handle the media.
Absolutely. And I just think that it would be a good match. You're bringing in the future. into the ticket. So I think that would be a good match. Well, George, thank you so much for participating as always, and I think we'll have more chats about the vice presidency
I think so.
over the next few months, because
It's going to heat up.
it
I mean,
will.
it's going to heat up a lot faster now that we know that he's going to be the nominee.
But you know where it's really going to heat up, George? On the other side.
That's it. You know, I really let me conclude with this.
Yes.
This is going to sound extreme, but I really do believe, Silvio, that in the next few months we are going to see the Democrats, the liberals, the leftists just have a meltdown to try to derail Trump. I mean, it is so it's looking like a freight train coming at them at this point, and they're going to do everything possible. And it bothers me, while at the same time I look at it comically. You know,
well, I think it bothers me too, but I think they're self-destructing at the same time, which is that. George, I'm sorry that we don't get to talk about the Cowboys today, but
that's all right.
I guess we can do that next September.
We've got plenty of time to talk about them.
Yeah, we got plenty of time. They're going to keep their coach, which is probably a good thing. I never thought,
and their quarterback.
And their quarterback. I never thought McCarthy was the problem, honestly.
No,
now,
I
Prescott, the quarterback Prescott is not necessarily the problem, but I do think they need to start looking beyond Prescott. Maybe bring in a younger guy to start grooming him.
Back him up.
Yeah, for the future. George, have a great weekend. I hope the weather doesn't treat you too badly down there.
No. I think we're gonna survive climate change.
I'm sure you will. You survive any change, George. You're like what is that animal that survives everything? What is that? Whatever.
A groundhog.
That's it. All right. You'll survive anything. Thank you for joining us, George.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Our good friend George Rodriguez from South Texas. Again, as I discussed with George, we have a lot of time to discuss the vice presidency, who it's going to be. I mean, I think the smart thing for President Trump to do, or former President Trump to do, would be to just don't say anything. I also think once he wraps up, and I think this thing will be wrapped up in New Hampshire, Nikki Haley may come in within 10 points, maybe even 5 points, because of all these independents who are going to vote for her. But it's over. She doesn't have a future. South Carolina doesn't look very good for her. So I wouldn't be surprised if she drops out as well, which would be good for everybody. And then President Trump can go into hiding for a while, because I think the big news is going to come out of the Democrat Party over the next few months. There's a lot of discontent in the Democrat Party, but they do a good job of hiding it when they're talking about President Trump. Well, have a good weekend, everybody, or the rest of it. We're going to get some rain Sunday night, and hopefully it doesn't turn into ice or snow or flurries by tomorrow morning. The temperatures are going to be in the high 20s, early 30s, so it could. Let's just hope it doesn't, so that we don't mess up our driving tomorrow morning. Talk to you later. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and whoever wins this weekend, I hope San Francisco, what is it? San Francisco, what is it? Baltimore, Detroit, and then the one, Buffalo and Kansas City, one of those two. It should be a good, the next weekend should be a lot of good football. Bye-bye, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas.